Welcome to the Rise Together podcast weekly hot take series. Every week, we're going to bring you powerful stories and strategies from leaders who are making a real impact by building stronger, more resilient communities. Get ready to be inspired, motivated, and equipped with the tools to thrive in both your personal and professional life.
Hey everybody, this is Beth Almaris with the Foundation for Family and Community Healing. We're a small nonprofit that's really dedicated to helping individuals and organizations build strength and resilience through skill-based education and leadership development. And speaking of that, we have a great guest today, Stephen Epstein, who is the founder and CEO at Momentum is Balance. How are you doing today, Stephen?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Thanks for coming on. Stephen's calling in from the other coast, from Oregon. So why don't you tell us all what your company is all about?
Yeah, so my company helps socially conscious organizations drive change while staying true to their balance and to their values. I do executive coaching. I do some consulting, leadership development. I work with a lot with CEOs and senior leaders to kind of strengthen their systems, develop their teams, and scale their impact.
Great. And what kind of like focus areas do folks come to you from?
Yeah, so I work a lot with education and youth serving nonprofits. And so my background, which I will get into a little bit later, is as an educator. But I've done work with kind of coding organizations that give kids internships. I've done work with museums. I've done work with environmental nonprofits. So really a slew of organizations.
Okay. So, we hear the term leadership development all the time. What does that mean to you?
Well, this is great because everyone has a different approach. So I recently got my certification in executive coaching through the International Coaching Federation. And so, there's a little bit of methodology to their approach. And so I'll start with their approach and then I'll go into what I do. And so the approach that I use in coaching is really to let the leader drive their own learning. And so the leader will come with a challenge they want to work on. I will ask questions. I will name patterns that I notice, but I won't advise. And so there's a component, right, of leadership development that is about the leader driving their own development with help from someone like me, which is really about coming up with new ideas to solve problems. Or one of the most common things I work with is people have binary thinking. I either do this or that. I'm either an empathetic leader or I'm a jerk. And there's not any sort of like nuance in between. And that is often an indicator to me as a coach that folks are just a little stuck. And just by asking a few questions, providing examples, I share a lot of articles. So there's a very much leadership development around kind of like self-driven.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I do for leadership development is a lot of facilitation. And so, for example, one way that I develop leaders is I'll get brought in to help let's say a nonprofit. And a nonprofit that is like youth serving, that is running some sort of program. I work a lot with program. That's really my specialty. And we'll do kind of like an analysis on some of the challenges. And through the process of doing an analysis, something is like pretty simple, like a 5 whys or root cause analysis is often referred to, where you're just saying like, hey, we're not fully enrolled. Well, why are you not fully enrolled? Well, people don't know about us. Well, why don't they know about you? Well, we're not really sure. What could be some reasons why? You keep asking why until you get to like a root cause. And in the process, it helps leaders develop that way of thinking. So you leave them and you say, you don't need to hire me next time you want to do this. Like, here's the playbook I used. Here's the session that I used. You're of course welcome to hire me. I always want to like continue supporting, but like I want to develop you to develop this type of thinking and this type of meeting facilitation on your own.
Yeah, it's that capacity building.
Yeah. because you don't want to become a consultant. I mean, you don't want to become a consultant that like is always there, right? You want to be able to like do the work, leave the place better than you found it, and then get out of the way.
Right. Yeah, there's a difference between being a consultant and a contractor, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And even in my longest engagements where I am like kind of fractional, I am like, I want to do this until you have the capacity to hire the person that will then do a lot of the work that I'm doing.
Got it. So what are some of the challenges that leaders are coming to you for right now?
You know, there's one big trend that I'm anchoring a lot of like my products and my learning and my work around. And this is, you know, in organizations that are trying to like make the world a better place. So that could be a team in a for-profit, it could be a nonprofit, it could be an individual leader. There are these leaders that have really big visions for the impact they want to have. And they're compelling visions. It's what attracts success to them, what attracts board members to them, what attracts me to them. And in the process of doing that work, they run into a real big tension point because they're trying to grow the business. So that could be raising money. It could be partnerships. It could be increasing enrollment. In many cases, because they raise the money or are the person associated with the business, they're trying to deliver the service, run the program, and they're trying to run the team. And they're just collapsing under the weight of this kind of like triple demand on them by the system they've put in place. So I kind of plug in and say, let me take one of these off of your plate. And the first question I'll ask is like, which one of these do you like the best? Which one are you best at? And most often they actually don't want to run the team. And so I will come in and I'll say, well, let me help like set up some systems, line up your meetings, your routines. If you're using Slack, let me help you get that cleaned up. Let me help you work on this. Let me help you like set up the right org structure, set up the right cadence of like talent development. And then let me get out of the way when you are able to do the other components, which is delivering the program and building the business. So hopefully now I've been there, let's say 3 months, 6 months. You are then have raised enough money about your business sustainable enough that you could hire a chief program officer or a president. Or if you actually like running the team and don't like the partnership work, let me help you with that. And then you could hire a chief partnership officer or whatever the title is kind of like the point. But the idea being that like you were at a pinch point, a pain point, a tension point. And the big challenge with that is that you have a very compelling vision that will make the world or your community a better place. And it's not going to happen. And we need to get in there and help make sure that your vision is realized.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really hard balance to find because it's really hard to work on the business when you're working in the business.
Yeah. And then there's so much pressure now, right, to like model taking time off, model sustainability, like be very human centered, right? And there's all this pressure to be a very specific type of leader. And that I think people are just losing their way. I mean, I feel the pressure and I don't manage anyone.
Yeah, we're at a really interesting place for sure.
Yeah. And I think
no matter what industry you're in, I think.
I agree. And, you know, especially, you know, there's a lot of energy now around funding and federal funding being cut. But I think that like those of us who have been in the workforce a while have, especially in public sector, like education, nonprofit, or things that receive public money, have seen the up and down with it, right? So like those of us who have seen the up and down with it, when you zoom out and talk about that pressure, it's different, but it's not totally new, right? Like public money going down is not like totally new, and it will come up again depending on how things go.
Maybe the swiftness is new.
The swiftness is new, and then I think people, especially coming out of the pandemic, where there was a lot of public money, have not been thinking about their organizations and systems in, I think, some of the ways that your organization thinks about it from a resiliency perspective, and not just getting up, but are we built to weather upflows and downflows of funding?
Yeah. So what are some of the trends that organizations can be looking out for, just in terms of either leadership development or resiliency? What are some trends or tools that are out there for folks?
One of the most powerful tools that I have used, and I really like simple tools, is this idea of like a 70-20-10 philosophy on talent development. And so you're running an organization, and you've got people, and you have got to develop my people. And so I'm going to send them to this workshop, or going to get them a coach. And the idea that sort of like formal learning is really only 10% of development. So then you're like, oh, well, then I'm going to have to just like work with them and coach them up and develop them up. But that level of like shared learning is really only 20%. And most of your development as a human, as an employee, is through 70% on the job experience.
Right. It's that hands-on.
And that means that you have to make mistakes and drop balls. And one of my best bosses ever, when I would make a mistake, would ask me, is that a rubber ball or is that a glass ball? Did the mistake you make break something, or do you just bounce something and that was like jarring to you? And so we want to set systems where our folks can be like dropping the quote unquote rubber balls as much as possible and learning from it, and not have the pressures that I talked about earlier around growth, around program delivery, remove that. Those things can exist together. You can have employees learning on the job and making mistakes and still run good programs and still run an organization that grows and achieves its vision. But that is a little bit of a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And so one of the challenges I see is people really quick to fire and let people go.
Like zero tolerance for mistakes?
I would say not zero tolerance, but I would say a lack of noticing of patterns. It's like, hey, I've let 3 people go in the last year, and there's some trends in why I've let them go. And I wonder if those trends are more like looking at myself in the mirror and how the organization is set up, rather than turning it around and pointing it at the employee.
Right. So like putting those supports in place.
Yeah, or even just like communication systems, like making like the culture actually clear that you can make a mistake and what kind of mistakes are mistakes that like are growth mistakes versus mistakes that are like, you really like did something problematic.
Yeah. Really interesting. Well, if folks are interested in learning more, Stephen, what's the best way for them to find you?
LinkedIn is probably the place I'm most active. I post every week, and I think it's like Stephen J. Epstein on LinkedIn. And that's probably the best way to interact with me if you don't already have my email or my phone number.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for the thoughtful questions. Have an awesome day.
Of course. And thank you to our listeners. I'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us today on our Rise Together podcast weekly hot take series. We hope you've been inspired by today's stories and strategies for building stronger, more resilient communities. Remember, resilience isn't just about bouncing back. It's about growing through every challenge to become bigger and better. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who could benefit from these insights. Stay connected, stay resilient, and we'll see you next time.